It's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
Hello and welcome. He is Gary McNamara. I'm Eric Harley. Welcome to Tuesday. Welcome to April. Gary?
I'm here.
How's it going?
Good. Can't complain. Hopefully we're on the entire night. That would be a nice thing if we could do that.
Exactly. Yesterday's show was interrupted by technical issues, and it was not a pre-April Fool's joke. It just because that wouldn't be funny at all, actually. So we apologize after the first hour. Our equipment failed, and so the rats quit running in the wheel, and we had to. We went to a best of show. So
what I didn't like is for the first 20 minutes of the second hour, you and I were having a great conversation that nobody heard.
It was the best radio I have ever done. In 41 years, I have never done better radio, and only Gary McNamara heard it because our production crew was working on the issues. They weren't even listening to our show, but they don't normally listen anyway. So
it was for me. The end result was, I don't know if I told you, I know I told Alan earlier that I've gotten so much sleep in the last 48 hours.
Yeah.
And I've slept everywhere. I've slept in a plane. I've slept in a hotel. I've slept at my home. Last night, we got out of here. It was Central Time, 20 after 1. It was like, okay, they can't fix it till today or yesterday.
Yeah.
And, later in the day. And my first thing was, what am I going to do? Because everything is based on, the fact that I'm going to work till 5, go home and sleep at 5:30. I don't want to be awake for the next few hours. So I went home and just sat on the recliner. 10 minutes later, I'm like, I can go to sleep. I went to sleep at 2, woke up at 7:30, and then slept again great. Woke up at 10 o'clock, and I'm like, dead to the world. I feel like I've just been loaded down with barbiturates.
Yeah.
Anybody do barbiturates anymore?
Yeah. Do they even anyone even say barbiturates besides you anymore?
Yeah, I don't think so. That just aged me, didn't it?
Right.
Oh, okay. Let me rephrase it. Downers, man.
Downers. There you go. Exactly. I went home and finished the designing and planning of my wife's. I'm putting together a rain barrel irrigation system. And we're about to get, unbelievable rain this year, or this week, a couple inches maybe, right? And that's actually, since our drought of the last few months, that will be unbelievable. But I want to fill those, I've got some rain barrels, and I'm getting them set up and rerouting all of my storm drains and everything else, so my rain gutters. And so I did the planning, but Home Depot doesn't open till 6. So I'm just sitting there, okay. Oh, as soon as they open, went over and loaded a bunch of stuff. I had 3 truckloads of stuff that I unloaded and finished all that prep, and hopefully we'll finish out today. So I did actual manual labor. By the way, I could never do that for a living. I have buddies that I've known for a lifetime, and they do manual labor. Talking to truck drivers at the Mid-America show this past week, and I'm always amazed at how much, how many people do manual labor. I mean, you got to really, I'm thinking to myself, all I did was go to Home Depot and unload my truck. That's all I did. And I'm worn out for the day. But it's, we want to apologize to the audience that the live show, didn't happen. And also that you had to hear something twice, our best of show that played. So it's.
Yeah, I was getting, when I woke up, I'm getting questions.
Yeah, what's going on?
Yeah. Well, this doesn't relate to anything we talk. Oh, it's from
you posted
last
on
week
X,
sometime.
That, and I reposted what you posted. But the thing about X is that if you don't scroll down, hours later, it's already lost in the void. So, So here we are. It's live. It's April 1st. No April Fool's jokes, as far as you know, and it's crazier than ever. Oh my gosh. Babylon Bee
I didn't
had
even look at it today.
the what was it? The 11 ways Trump could serve a third term. Oh man, I'm talking. I was literally, and it's quite often with the Babylon Bee that I'm literally laughing out loud. And let's see here.
I just looked at the lead headline. Trump doesn't rule out the possibility of becoming immortal emperor of mankind for the next 10,000 years.
Okay, so here it is. Can Trump serve a third term? Babylon Bee.
Okay.
Parody. This is parody, humor, and so funny. Here are
conservative Christian parody.
Yeah, conservative Christian.
Yeah,
and it's so much fun. Can Trump serve a third term? Here are 11 ways it could happen. I love this. 11 ways it could happen. Number one, Trump could appoint himself as a federal judge and unilaterally proclaim himself the forever president. That one I looked at and I thought, oh, wait a minute, there may be something there.
I will tell you, that one made the rounds. That went viral over this past weekend.
Yeah.
That was in memes all over the place, how Trump...
and the subheadline or the subline of the second line on that one is, federal judges can do anything they want and no one can stop them. And then, two, he might change his name to Bill Trump, making him legally eligible to run again. The founders never accounted for someone who would do something as devious as this. Number three, he could collect all the Infinity Stones. This is from Marvel, the Marvel movie, and snap his fingers, granting himself infinite terms. Trump could just never leave, extending his second term forever. The scary thing, this is technically legal. Again, this is a Babylon Bee humor. Yeah. He could switch parties and become a Democrat so he could do whatever he wants. Here's one. He could use the Men in Black neuralizer.
Neuralizer,
yeah,
yes.
Neuralizer. And to make the nation forget he was already president. And then they write, maybe he's already used this on us, and we're living in the hell of a fourth or even fifth Trump term without knowing it. He might die and be resurrected as a glowy blue force ghost and rule all eternity. Elon could build a time machine to help Trump go back in time to 1787 and change the Constitution. Trump could sign an executive order that only orange people may run for president. Trump could pardon himself for future constitutional violations. I like that one. Before leaving his second term. And then he'd be able to have all the terms he wants. No strings attached. And he could convince some washed-up loser career politician with dementia to run, then secretly pull the strings from behind the scenes. Oh, man. Because that one is akin to the Melania idea, right? Mm-hmm. That was floating over the weekend. No, she could run, she would win, and then, someone else would be actually running the country. Anyway, I read those and I was just laughing out loud because of the craziness of, everything right now.
Well, the one I like is Jonathan Turley. I just saw the headline. Fox's Jonathan Turley says Trump's talk about a third term makes J.D. Vance look like Mini-Me.
I love it.
And that's where you just use him because the whole thing is you have Vance. That's the whole one there. Vance runs for president. Then Vance says, okay, I'm stepping down. And then Trump becomes the president because he's vice. Yeah. Trump will run as vice president. But again, that can't happen because of the 12th Amendment. And the only thing last night I said, well, wait a minute, hold it. If he runs for Congress, he could technically then become the Speaker of the House.
Exactly.
And then whoever runs, if it's J.D. Vance, then who would be the vice president for J.D. Vance?
Donald Trump Jr.
Donald Trump Jr., mm-hmm. Right, but then they would both resign.
Right.
And then immediately, and then at least temporarily, Trump would become the president again.
Right. I mean, it's the Babylon Bee, by the way, they're so creative. I'm surprised they only stuck to 11. They could have done 100. They're that good. But it was, there were so many crazy things, going on. There's so many crazy things going on. One of the things that I was over the last several days traveling to the Mid America show. When you and I travel, we talk about this on the plane. It's prime show prep time. So there's things going on, and when you're traveling and you're just, especially when we're not on over the weekend, and you can't comment on them, but I'm bookmarking all of these things. Then by the time I get to Sunday night to come back from the trip, and it's like, oh my gosh, the stuff from Thursday and Friday was just, that's in the void now. We've moved on because of all the stuff that happened on Saturday and Sunday. I'll say this though.
Go ahead, because that's what I was sitting there thinking today, because the show was cut short. I said, got to give Eric just time to rehash stuff from last week that he didn't get a chance to talk about.
You brought it up yesterday when we were talking to nobody, and I think I think it bears repeating because nobody heard it but me, and I'm not even sure I was listening. It was the Bret Baier interview with DOGE, and all of them sitting there. And I thought to myself, all of us who have been talking about fiscal sanity, and screaming about it forever, since you were a talk show or since you were a talk host going back to 1889, and
I did it through Telegraph.
Exactly. Hear ye. And but we've been screaming for decades, and it just seems we were not confident there would even be a discussion on the national debt. But going over those things, and then some more comments by Elon Musk, and I think he talked about this too during that interview, because I was rewatching it in portions, and while I was reading some things, I was more listening to it than I was, and I was reading some other things connected to it. And when they talk about like Medicaid cuts and this, there's not going to be any Medicaid cuts. We're talking about fraud. If people want to call those cuts, those aren't cuts. Yeah, let's cut the fraud, but we're talking about going in and what was the one with the babies, the loans that that a 9-month-old was. He goes, that's a very ambitious baby. He gets a 9-month-old gets a government loan. Those types of things, everything that they hit on. But I think it was imperative, and I don't know if they set this up proactively and reached out to Bret Baier or if it was vice versa. I would think, though, maybe Susie Wiles or somebody just said, look, this would be a good idea because Elon gets so much flack. I mean, the activists are going to do what they do. But let's put him there let's show the other faces of the people who are doing the work behind DOGE and who they are and what they do and what they've given up. And now they sat there on TV openly and didn't blur their face sitting there next to Elon Musk. That right there is a risk in terms of, of course, the radical left. So they're in it to do something. Again, they're volunteering. These people are, they're very good at what they do. But the one thing they talked about was like, well, there's no connection in the government computers. They don't talk to each other. The systems don't talk to each other. How is that not intuitive? These are tech people that know exactly what they're doing. In other words, all right, someone comes in for, this, they apply for a loan. A 9-month-old baby applies for the loan. Guessing it didn't happen that way. But the Social Security Administration, of course, tags them as, well, wait a minute, that's a 9-month-old. They don't qualify for the loan. All of these, it's clearly
But they don't
fraud.
talk. The Social Security Administration doesn't talk to the
computers
SBA.
Don't connect to each other.
Right.
You would be shocked. And I've been told this by family members that work at the FBI, that work in Intel, that work in the military, that work in state law enforcement, and there's no connection. There's really no you have to proactively communicate with other agencies. It is you'd be floored by the lack of communication. And Elon brought something up. He said, that means there's great opportunity for anybody who wants to skirt the system, whether it's from the inside, inside the Beltway, somebody in government, or somebody else who wants to commit fraud. They could do that knowing the government isn't going to have checks and balances in terms of being able to confirm that. If we're going to do anything with AI, there should be an intuitive system in place. They didn't say this, but I think this is what they were saying. There should be an intuitive system in place that says, hey, this is going on, and this. But then you get into the whole thing of, well, we can't have this communicating. We can't have that communicating with this. That would violate this, and that would violate this. There needs to be a fluid system in place so that the American taxpayer, their money is accounted for. It's going to be taken. If we're going to shrink government, let's start with the fraud. And if they're taking so much money from us through taxes, and, here we are coming up in a couple of weeks, tax deadline. If this is going to happen, DOGE, I've been saying this from the beginning, DOGE should never end. It should have been from the beginning, this kind of accounting, and also the intuitive nature of a government where all departments communicate with each other. That needs to be the norm, not the exception.
86690 Red Eye.
This report is brought to you by Shell Rotella. With advanced synthetic technology, is designed to help keep your rig running with more mileage and less maintenance. Cold weather takes a toll on trucks. As warmer weather rolls in, it's time to assess the impact winter has had on your vehicle before you find yourself stranded roadside this spring. If you're experiencing sluggish cranking, start your spring maintenance routine by having your electrical system tested by a professional technician. Your batteries, alternator, and starter have been working overtime to keep up with cold starts and thick oil during winter. Continuing to crank a vehicle with low voltage will lead to more damage and downtime later on. Big rigs are big investments. Take care of yours now to help avoid downtime later and keep rolling through to next winter.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90 Red Eye on Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. The DOGE thing last week with bringing everybody on Fox News, they should do more of that. One of the things, there's the substance of what they're trying to do, then there's the politics of it.
Yeah.
And just understand that we always talk both, and we try to always, in our preamble to any topic, say, okay, this is our political analysis of this, and then in other places, this is what we believe should be done, and we believe the substance of it is good.
Right.
But the politics of it is, you look at the last election, you roughly had 10 to 20 million people change their vote or come aboard and vote.
Right.
But that's who you need to convince in every election.
Yeah.
It's just the reality of it.
Yeah.
And so when either side gets super partisan, it's obvious to those people that that's happening.
Right.
It's one of the reasons that the Democrats are absolutely panicking right now. They're so radical that 10 to 20 million is saying, no, we're still going to stick with Trump. We're going to give him a nice honeymoon.
Right.
A period here. What you saw, that was 80-20. When you had the DOGE people out there, if you polled the American public on the substance of it, it would be 80-20. And that's what you want. You want something that conservatives, conservative populists,
right,
and independents look at and go, well, this is just obvious.
Right.
I mean, we weren't doing this before.
Right.
That's what you want.
Listening to Red Eye Radio from the Uniden America Studios.
It's Friday Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. So, yeah, messaging, and that's what you got last week, just going over the stuff because if you're listening last night, it was most of it was the first hour was us, then it was a repeat show, best of the rest of the time because we had major technical problems, just trying to catch up with Eric, who was out a couple of days last week, so talking about the whole DOGE thing from last Thursday.
Yeah,
Thursday and then Friday also we interviewed, but we had talked about the Thursday when he brought everybody else in. And remember, the CEO of Airbnb, now there's a boycott going on, or I don't know if it's working or not, but the left screamed there's got to be a boycott there, too. They got to protest there, too. And all they talked about, and the beautiful thing was everything targeted people with common sense. Because there's no way that I looked at that and go, well, this is another 80-20 issue that the left is screaming about and protesting. And you and I talked a little bit yesterday about the protest around the country. I was in Buffalo, New York, visiting my dad, and they have the huge Tesla gigaplant. Only 2 gigaplants exist. One is in Buffalo. And the Democrat, remember, it was the Democrats, about 10 years ago, that took $1 billion and they called it the Buffalo Billion, and so much of it went to build that plant that they charge, I believe, Elon Musk $1 a year for, and now they're just screaming. Yeah, but they're screaming about it. But if you look at it, you had one of the counter protesters, because there were protesters and there were counter protesters, right? And one of the guys from the counter protesters said, "I don't know what to say." I don't know what they're angry about.
Well, and and that's another thing too, is that when you get down to the DOGE thing, because we remember, and it wasn't too long ago, when Michael Schellenberger came out with a report on U.S. aid and how that organization, that funding was being used for people on the left to target people on the right, and so it's clear that the left doesn't actually care about fraud. The GOP's been lazy about it this whole time. They keep talking about it and wagging their fingers, and it takes this kind of effort to wake everybody up, and hopefully it will amount to something. It will actually result in something. But the point is that if you look at voter ID, if you look at all of the fraud right now that they're finding with DOGE, well, the left likes that. They like that stuff to be in place because it lets that they don't care about any election integrity. They don't care about the taxpayer. They talked about doing something in the past, but now through the work of Michael Schellenberger and others, you find out how some of this money is being used. And the left is okay with that. And so they come up with, these are clearly organized demonstrations. Make as much noise as you can for a couple of things, because Trump, and then number 2, because we can't have things be transparent. The left doesn't want transparency. They don't. They don't want a system where, and this is the other, going back to the point that Elon made during the sit-down with Bret Baier. These government agencies aren't talking to it. There's no communication. The computer systems aren't connected where something would red flag automatically. And it's not that in fact, you could do that. You could build a more intuitive system without even having agencies share information. It would just be a red flag, and then that would be sent over to another agency that would confirm whether or not this is eligible, whether or not this might be fraud, but the red flag would come up. We're talking $36 trillion. Elon Musk mentioned this during the interview. We've said it, I don't know how many times, but at some point, the nation becomes insolvent, and then all of these programs go away. Everything goes away. Everything disappears. They keep saying, well, he's trying to cut Medicare and Medicaid. He's trying to cut it. They're starting with fraud. It's very simple, and it is an 80-20 issue. It might be a 90-10 issue. You know, these are things that everybody can understand. We played the audio of Obama, basically, his idea. He floated the idea of his own version of DOGE years ago. We played the audio from Mark Cuban. While he's never served in office, he's a voice on the left, and he talked about this kind of thing in 2017. And then that surfaced, and it's kind of come back to him recently. But
you
the
saw,
left,
you saw the other day, because where he came out, because when he was talking about DOGE and saying, well, I agree with it, but they're just doing it completely and totally wrong. And then I responded to him on X and said, excuse me, you're the one that told all of your customers that you were selling the team.
And you were going to remain in control of operations.
You're going to remain in control, that you were in control of operations of the basketball team.
Right.
You couldn't effectively communicate one single message.
Right.
Where they're now
on the Luka trade,
from the Luka trade. Then he went quiet. Did you hear what he said then over the weekend? Over the weekend, that it was never in the contract. The NBA wouldn't allow him to be in the contract. So you lied to the people. Well, it was implied, and we talked orally about the fact that, well, then you should sue them.
Right.
Or whatever. But it's all BS from Mark Cuban. Complete BS.
Don't lie to your fans.
Right. Don't lie to your customers.
Yep.
And sit there and you're the one telling DOGE what to do.
Right.
Shut up. Take a seat on the bench.
Yeah. Right.
But yeah, I just wanted to. I forgot to mention that when you mentioned.
Yeah, you and I talked about that last week. How you responded to him, but the update from the weekend, it's here we are on the left. There's no doubt in my mind. It's been demonstrated over and over again. They don't care about the truth. They don't care about transparency. They don't care about the debt, certainly. And again, I can throw the GOP. We've been going off on them because they've been lazy about this whole thing, too. And with few exceptions. But in terms of fraud, with what Michael Schellenberger found, the stuff that he found with U.S. aid is, to me, very similar to his work that he did in the Twitter files. It's with Matt Taibbi and Barry Weiss. It's that's real journalism, by the way. That's true journalism. And nobody countered him. Nobody came out and said, none of that's true. That didn't happen that way. You find these things and the left goes crazy. They don't want people looking behind the curtain because they could build their facade based on things like, that boy can be a girl. Why? Because the boy says so. The planet's going to end in 10 years, which they've been saying for 40 years. Longer, actually. And they can build out things that control your life and your children's lives. Your daughter doesn't have that privacy in the locker room anymore if we get our say-so. In fact, you don't have any say-so over your own child if they say so, and you're the parent. They build these facades out on climate change. My gosh, let's look at the cost of regulation on industry. I don't even know what the average, I'd have to look it up right now, the average cost of a big rig is right now. We pay for that. The consumer pays for that because those shipping companies, those trucking companies, the entire supply chain has to pass it on to the consumer. Otherwise, the supply chain wouldn't exist. They have to be able to make a profit in order to do all of that. So you look at all of this regulation based on what? Well, the world's going to end in 10 years. We've been saying for decades and decades and decades and decades and decades and decades. Clean air is one thing. Particulate matter we can measure, we can see it. But to the extent that we've had it in play now, not just in the cars and or trucks we drive, but also with our own land. Well, you have a culvert on your land. That means runoff from your land goes onto someone else's land. We're the EPA, and we have the right. Now, we have jurisdiction over your land if you're doing that, private owner. I mean, it never ends. Never ends. They want to build this facade out so they can control, ultimately, the capital. And then when private sector can no longer make the profit, and they keep going after profits more and more, they control the means of production. That's communism. It's where they wanted to go from the beginning. They've said openly over the years, we need to nationalize energy. We need to nationalize energy. They tried to nationalize
Remember Maxine Waters said we need to
said,
nationalize the oil companies? Remember that one?
Yep, remember? And that's exactly what I remember. That's exactly what I was thinking of.
Yeah.
And they said it that we need to nationalize it. When you get to the point, controlling the capital is one thing that's more towards socialism. When you control the means of production and the capital, you've got it. And the big chunks of the economy are energy and healthcare. And when you can control all of that, you've got full-on communism. Third term? Forget third term. The left is screaming dictator and fascism, and if the left gets their way, they'll have a forever president. Well, it will be a dictator, truly. If we get to communism, that's how it works. And this is what they strive to do. That's what they're trying to do. And that you don't have control over your own children. No authority.
I saw an interesting meme yesterday. It said, a Nazi would not want to get rid of the Department of Education.
Right.
And that's a great point.
Yep.
You know, when they called Trump and Elon Musk, whatever, when they called, especially Trump, a Nazi, well, the last thing a Nazi would want to do, if you were a Nazi leader or an authoritarian leader, the last thing you would do is get rid of the Department of Education because you would want the Department of Education under control of you.
Yes, for proper indoctrination.
Right. The last thing that you would do is send it to the states and locals to run their education.
Right.
Then you, as a Nazi, don't have control.
Exactly.
And if you're a Nazi, the first thing you want is control of the children.
You control the children. You control their minds. You control the language. You control the capital and the economy. You control the means of production. And they're screaming about Trump and this discussion, which really we all know isn't going to happen. A third term? No. What we need to fear is what they've been working on for far too long, and it needs to come to a full stop.
866-90-RED-EYE.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90-RED-EYE.
It's Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome and good morning. Thanks so much for being here. Coming up following the top of the hour, lawfare in France, the Wisconsin race. I guess it's tomorrow, right? Or today? Yes, today.
Today.
The election for the judge. In the courts and how that could eventually change the makeup and create, actually take away 2 Republican districts and put in 2 Democrat districts. And interesting, Scott Jennings talking about it, he said, look, there's a ton of Republican voters that just vote for Trump. There's people that went in and voted in November, voted for Trump, and then walked out. Yeah. There's a ton of low propensity voters. They're not ideological. Right. You know, and he played Elon Musk talking last night in Wisconsin, who said, look, if you don't have the House, you're dead. Yeah. And you got to have the House, and this can change the direction of Western civilization. And Jennings is like, the Republican Party needs to make that known to these people that none of the Trump agenda gets through if you don't have the House.
This is what I said the other day. This really is Trump's midterm because it's going to be about whether or not he has the power to get things done, and that Trump is going to have to be so active. And I don't know if rallies are going to be in the future, but certainly campaigning for these House seats and doing everything that he can. But he has to. It is a situation where he has to go in and convince those that showed up for him in November that next November they got to show up for him again, and that this is about him. So assuming that particular candidate is on board with what Trump is doing in the GOP, and I assume they are, but he's going to have to campaign very heavily for the midterm.
Top of the Hour News is brought to you by House Products. Visit houseproducts.com.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
All across America. We are Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome and good morning. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
As always. All right, Liberation Day tomorrow.
Yeah, here come the tariffs.
Liberation Day.
Yeah.
We've been discussing, my gosh, well, I've been discussing tariffs since I've been a radio talk show host because there's always been some kind of form or discussion of it because I remember the original NAFTA was being discussed when I became a talk show host of a new trade agreement way back in 89, even though I don't think it passed to 93?
Right.
It was?
Right.
93, 94, I forgot when it was, but that discussion was always going on. One thing that I got response to was a couple of weeks ago. I get frustrated once in a while when I said Peter Navarro is an idiot. I got some people really upset. Here's my evidence that Navarro told Fox News on Sunday. Tariffs are going to raise $600 billion a year, or $6 trillion over a 10-year period. He said on Fox on Sunday. This is on top of the $100 billion a year for Mr. Trump's car and truck tariffs. And the message is, this is a quote, the message is tariffs are a tax cuts. Tariffs are tax cuts to the American consumer. Well, either he is completely economically illiterate or he's a liar.
Yeah. Right.
One or the other.
Yeah.
We all know what they're saying is if it's going to raise $600 billion a year, there's two things to clarify. Trump isn't saying it anymore, but Trump was saying that, remember, how the message has changed. It was foreign governments are going to pay the tariffs. And yesterday, I think it was, or Saturday, when he was asked about it, he was asked about the Wall Street Journal story about the fact that the people inside the administration are panicking because they don't know where he's going to go with tariffs. And so I was looking. I think I told you yesterday, I kept looking to see if anybody was disputing it, because you can find out, because the administration reacts very quickly to anything that they believe is false. And you couldn't find it on True Social. You couldn't find it. This was yesterday when I was looking, True Social or Response 47 anywhere. I'm like, oh, okay. So they're panicking. There was the story that Trump warned automobile companies not to raise their prices, which, again, is the evidence that Trump understands. And then he said, I think it was when he was asked a question about it, he said, I don't care if American automakers raise their prices. That means more money for us. And I just shook my head. I went, my God, you just opened up for the midterms this is what Trump wants. This is what the Republicans want. I don't care whether automobile companies raise their prices.
Yeah, because what's left out of that equation is what the behavior or response would be from the consumer.
Well, I'm not even going to the reality of economics yet. I'm just talking about the politics
of
you having that on tape.
Yeah, but I was, and that's the problem too at the midterm. Because what happens when the consumer doesn't respond and those cars sit there on the lots? Then you start having an economy problem, and that hurts you at the midterm.
Well, the problem is it doesn't matter now whether a car is made in assembled in the United States or not, because they put the tax on they put the tax on auto parts, the tariffs.
Right.
So all auto parts are going to be tariffed.
Right.
And so things are assembled here. You know, you made the case when we were talking about this earlier on economics. He's saying, come and bring your companies here. Well, if a Toyota is made here in the United States, yes, there are American workers that are making the vehicle. All the profits go back to Japan.
Right. Yeah. Right. It's because if we're going to say this is about protecting this or protecting the country, or the question is it about jobs? Is it about, I don't know, is it about fentanyl? Is it about, there's the problem. There's the problem. If you have tariffs in place, the dealerships are right now scrambling. They're scrambling. They don't know what to do. Well, they have to raise the price, but the consumer won't respond to a price increase like that.
Well, you know, we saw it on washing machines. Remember the tariff on washing machines? Washing machine prices rose nearly 12% afterwards. Didn't matter whether they were foreign.
Right.
Didn't matter where the washing machine was made.
Yeah.
It went up 12%.
Right.
My point is, if you want to talk about reciprocal tariffs, I think what they're doing with...
Because that was part of the steel tariff, the washing machine, right? The appliances that were built with steel, there was an impact from the raw materials on that as well. I don't know if washing machines, I can't remember if washing machines were also tariffed, but that was also part of the steel thing, because appliance prices went up after the steel tariffs.
No, he put a 20 to 50% tariff on large residential washing machines specifically.
And the steel tariffs also impacted that also. Because of raw materials. I don't remember what the
my
equation
point
was.
is, if you want to sell reciprocal tariffs, that's one thing. Don't lie to the American people and say it's not a tax increase. The majority of tariffs are paid for by the importers. If there is a company that is importing something and they have a base in the United States, then that company is paying the tariff, but it's the import side of that company that's paying the tariff.
Right.
And so that's the reality of it. But it's like saying that the minimum wage has no effect when you raise minimum wage. When you raise the cost of goods and services, now both Navarro and Trump are talking about hundreds of billions of dollars being raised on the tariffs. That means that that people will still be buying foreign goods.
Yeah, that the consumer won't change in their behavior.
Right.
And that's not true.
Right. Well, no, but it's two ways. In some ways, they won't. They will pay the tariff to get what they.
Some will.
Some will pay the tariff.
But the overall consumer base will change. You know, it's going to impact those sales.
Well, yeah, of course it's good. When you charge more, you produce less.
Yeah.
But the point I'm trying to make here is the political point on taxes, not the whole economic point. Because what they're saying is it's not a tax increase on the American public. Well, it is. And because it's collected by, the majority is collected by the import side, because these are importers and retail outlets getting it. But if it's a company, if it's, for example, like Toyota, if Toyota is selling, even though they make a significant portion of their vehicles in the United States right now, I'm using it as an example, if Toyota moves a car across, well, then Toyota would pay it, but it would be the American branch of Toyota that is paying for it at that point. And my thing is, don't lie to the American public. That's why do you think the American public is, except for China, anti-tariff? The American public understands that if you increase the cost through the supply chain, it's going to be passed on to the consumer. This is an argument that Democrats made. Republicans should not be making Democrat arguments.
Well, it's again, similar to that argument that was made by the left on raising the minimum wage, that it doesn't have an impact and
right.
that it means that more money is flowing and the whole thing. And, this idea, you have to leave out part of the equation to make your point, which means, again, if you start on the wrong premise, it's wrong. The math is wrong to begin with. The behavior by the consumer base will change.
It always does. You and I have always said governments can manipulate an economy, but they cannot change how economics works, which means they cannot change how people respond to incentive, which then the lack of incentive could be a disincentive also. We say incentive or disincentive. I remember the economist in Rochester. This is the last time we had talked about this going back. Not the last time, a bunch of times ago, maybe about 15 years ago, he came out and said, look, economics is simply about how people respond to incentive. That's it. Anything else is BS. And if you try to make the case that a tax increase is a tax cut, that's BS. Don't do that. If you want to make the case, now history doesn't show it, happens, but if you wish to make the case that tariffs across the board on everyone will make us richer, well, then explain to the American public the pain they're going to have to go through. For Navarro to come out and say a $600 billion a year tax increase, because it's taxes, it's a tariff tax. Same thing, it's paid for by the importers, passed on to the consumer.
And Trump has already said there will be pain.
Yeah, that's my point.
Yeah.
Trump's saying one thing. Mm-hmm. I don't care if the price of foreign cars go up, because then people will pay for the American vehicles, which then, well, how do you make the money then?
Okay, comparing apples to apples. Think about this.
But then again, if they buy the American vehicles, we saw, doesn't matter what the product is. The American steel did it. They raised their steel prices when the tariffs were put on it, and the people that bought the steel were hurt afterwards. That's just economics. It's not. Yep. This isn't something that is an opinion. It's how people respond to an incentive.
What was it? 13 months ago, bought my truck. It's a Chevy. It's a domestic OEM, but it was assembled in Canada. It would be affected. But a Toyota Tundra is assembled in San Antonio. Now, ultimately, Eric's going shopping, right, for a new truck, because it has been 13 months. My truck's getting old. And he has to make a decision. Is he going to make a decision based on that? If we're talking about protectionism, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then I go in and, the Chevy that was assembled in Canada is hit with that tariff, and the price went up. But the Toyota Tundra assembled in San Antonio, which, by the way, is a great truck, maybe some issues with the 24 model, but they've had a pretty good run in terms of trucks being built. But if we're talking just on the protectionism, on pricing, well, I'm going to go with one that doesn't have a tariff on it.
Yeah, but the American vehicle will have tariffs on every single foreign part that came in to assemble it here in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
So the price will go, not just will the price will go up because they can allow it to go up because their competition through government regulation is forced to pay more.
And the finished product has a tariff on it. Yeah.
Right, if it got imported in, the finished product would. But if it was assembled here.
Mm-hmm. I know.
It was assembled here, every single part that came from a foreign company, because they're taxing the auto parts too.
Your point is that across the board prices go up, but I mean, if I'm sticker pricing, the greater impact. If the greater impact, hey, I'd like to have a domestic or Chevy. I'm because I am a Chevy guy. I would love to buy a Chevy, but it's more affordable to buy a foreign make because it's assembled here in the U.S. because it wasn't impacted as much. And that's the problem, again, if you're talking protectionism, because ultimately that money goes back to the parent company, goes back to the nation of origin for that parent company. There's no way around that. If you're talking protectionism, if this isn't about protectionism, then tell me what it's about. And there's another problem. Is it about fentanyl? I don't know.
No, it's not about fentanyl. No.
Well,
fentanyl
I'm not asking you
for the last 2 days.
3
days.
I'm not asking you. I'm asking them because I don't know what the message is. That's the problem.
Right. The message the message is now. They made it clear really since late last week. The message is everything gets tariffed.
Until they say something different tomorrow.
Until they see something tomorrow. And it's not whether they have reciprocal tariffs. It's whether they don't like the fact that you have a sales tax or you have another trade impediment, which the United States has those same things.
Right. Well, that's my problem. It goes back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. There will be pain, and then someone else in the administration is saying, "Oh no, it's a tax cut." And then it's, well, we don't care if there's pain or if they raise the prices. The ultimate point here, there's a midterm which basically started on Election Day this past November. The campaigning for that. Trump has limited time. We want everything to be in line so that he can continue to have his party in control of the House and the Senate for the full 4 years.
The biggest political thing, and people have not felt the price increases yet, is that landslide numbers of people in every poll, not one, every poll, landslide numbers. We talk about 80-20. It's almost 2/3 of Americans in every poll say Trump is not doing enough about prices. Mm-hmm. That's a problem because now the only thing the pressure is on is to raise prices.
By the way, there's an indirect impact on used vehicles because what will happen?
There'll be more of a demand for used vehicles.
And prices will go up.
Supply and demand.
Yep.
866-90 Red Eye.
Brought to you by FPPF, Fuel Power Max.
Owner-operators can save a hefty amount of money by participating in discount fuel networks. If you're leased and your fleet has a fuel optimizer program, use it. Such a program helps plan a trip based on fuel prices and locations in the carrier's fuel network. The larger the carrier, typically the larger the discounts that are possible. Fees for using such networks have become rare thanks to competition for drivers. Owner-operators are well advised, however, to pass up network fuel stops that are too costly, are too far off route, sell inferior fuel, or are dangerously or poorly maintained. For independent owner-operators, a bevy of fuel discount networks exists, from a variety of traditional fuel cards to the National Association of Small Trucking Companies network and the younger mudflap applications discounts at independent truck stops around the nation. Research the options and discounts available to find the right one for you. Owner-Operator Business 101 is provided by Overdrive's Partners in Business program. Go to overdriveonline.com to the Partners in Business section of the website for more details on this and many other topics.
Brought to you by Shell Rotella. With advanced synthetic technology is designed to help keep your rig running with more mileage and less maintenance.
We'll be right back with more Red Eye Radio with Eric Harley and Gary McNamara.
It's Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome and good morning. Coming up here on the show, we will hit a whole bunch of different things. Did you see where Trump sent 16 of the Venezuelan gang members out, but didn't use the Aliens Act, just used regular procedures? It's like, sorry, we're not defying the judge's order. We're using this.
Right. We're citing this now, and part of the law. You know, the left, again, the activist judges, everything's on full display. This is the concern. that we have, talking about tariffs and everything else, the left lost because of everything that's in play when it comes to reality. Don't make the economic reality for Americans worse as we get closer and closer to the midterm. That's what we don't want, because that reality will change everything. It won't matter what you're saying about whether it's good or bad, or it's a tax cut or not, or it will be as you mentioned, economics doesn't lie. And that will be the reality that people are facing, and that's what we're looking at. We want Trump to have the GOP in place for the second half of his second term.
Catch all 5 hours of the show live every night on the Red Eye Radio app. Available in the App Store. Red Eye Radio.
And he's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome and good morning. Thanks so much for being here. Download our Red Eye Radio app today, and you can listen when and where you choose. Let's go to Buck in Virginia. Buck, you're on Red Eye Radio. Welcome to the show.
Oh, my gosh. Thanks for having me, guys. Hey, first of all, I just want to point out to everybody listening how much work that the two of you must put into this job, and we so much appreciate what you're doing.
Thanks.
Yeah, that's first of all. But I just want to point out something that I almost don't want to point it out, because I almost feel like I'm showing our hand, but I feel like as if the conservative media is falling into, I mean, this what President Trump is just baiting everybody with. And everybody's analyzing the tariffs from a historical standpoint of what the tariffs have meant in the past. But nobody's talking about, well, not many people are talking about, that he's using it as a tool, and maybe he's using it in a new way, so that the historical viewpoint on tariffs from us conservatives who historically stand against tariffs for, historical reasons. But I don't think we're giving enough credit.
No. In fact, the only one who's brought up history is Trump on this. We brought up the fact of economics. History, Trump is the one who said, remember, Trump first started out by saying we can replace, 2 months ago he was saying we can replace the income tax with tariffs. So that meant permanently he would want, that was his goal at that point, was to tariff everything that came into the country. At that point, if you remember on the show, we went through the numbers, which, by the way, the administration did the other day and almost matches our numbers exactly what we had said they would be. And we said, well, you can never replace the income tax with tariffs because you need to raise them 200 to 300%. But with all the cutouts and everything else, you're never going to get to that point. But the tariffs that they would raise if they had 45%, I think it was across the board, 25% across the board on tariffs, and that would be on everything that comes in. Every single thing from every country, not reciprocal, would not raise the amount needed to just pay the interest on the debt. So why did he say something like that obviously could be fact-checked that you would know was not true? Secondly, it was for fentanyl. Now the fentanyl thing is gone. Thirdly, as he said, and I could go on all day with the inconsistent messaging from the administration, Trump said Canada and the trade agreement, what Canada does is horrible. Trump alone negotiated USMCA. Not one member of Congress negotiated it. It was Trump and his people that negotiated it just a few years ago. And now he says it's completely wrong. And at the time, he said it was the best free trade agreement in history. Well, you've got all these consistencies. He's going after Canada and saying it's so unfair what they do, but we have a trade surplus with Canada unless you count the oil that we get as a discount from Canada with Trump, that Trump just demanded less than a month ago that was a TC Energy Come back and rebuild that Keystone Pipeline so we can pump more Canadian oil in. I don't know. You sit there and say you know what his message is, yet you can't even tell me what the message is, except he's doing something that we need to trust him in the future. History doesn't matter to me, except when you see what economics does. My opinion on tariffs has never changed. Eric's have never changed, because the opinion is not based on an opinion of what we think, should happen because we have just an abstract opinion. It's because economics never changes, ever. Economics never changes. How people respond to incentive and disincentive never changes. It's as consistent as gravity. If prices go up, that's why supply and demand. Prices go up, people pay less. And finally, if there's this thing that the new way of thinking, then why is the message so inconsistent? And why, for example, do you believe that a $600 billion that is raised from tariffs, that is a tax on the imports coming in, the importer pays it, American companies pay it, or the foreign company's American subsidiary pays for it, then is passed on to the consumer? Do you believe that is a great tax cut for the American people, as Navarro just said yesterday? Peter Navarro said on the Sunday morning news shows.
I think that there are low information voters on both sides of the aisle, and a lot of the things that you just said make perfect sense to my mind, because I'm a capitalist, I'm a conservative, I'm a constitutional conservative. I agree with everything. I mean, mostly everything you just said. I guess I'm going to reiterate maybe the point of me calling in was that some of us just listen to all of this and think that y'all are reacting to debate just like the left would.
Well, what bait is that? Hold on, Buck. What bait is that?
What's the bait?
And what's the purpose of the bait?
Well, I hesitate because I don't have as much information as you guys do, and I would never try to debate the efficacy of tariffs.
but you were motivated. But you were motivated, Buck, to call us, which to me, that implies that you have a solid opinion based on information. But now you're telling me you don't.
Well, no. So let me try again. So
right.
My point is that maybe President Trump is using tariffs as a tool, and all of the repercussions of those tariffs are just fodder.
A tool for what?
His actual goal is something that we don't completely understand, and what he's releasing is and by the way, what I'm saying is what I think that some of us right-winged, low-information voters, the ones that tune in to the folks that we want to tune into, you all included, and oh my gosh, thank you so much for what you do, and the work you must put in is amazing. But I just feel like he's maybe using this as a tool that his history can't comment on. And I feel like even the right-wing media is only talking about historical knowledge of tariffs.
Well, wouldn't that tool be to lead to something great as a part of making America great again? And if that's the case, then why wouldn't he, being, I guess, more like a Yoda now, be telling people this is the ultimate plan?
Well, because
you'd want to promote it, right?
Without thinking about it, without thinking too much about that question, my first immediate answer is that he doesn't want the opposition to know what he's doing. And
why not?
Even this conversation maybe is telling the opposition.
Well, you mean the opposition on the left or the opposition on trade? Are those trade countries? Which one are you talking about?
I guess when I said it, I meant the opposition in trade as far as the other countries.
All right, fair enough. But the problem is too. Then, if they think he's inconsistent in the message, then they don't respond accordingly. If he's solid in the message and says, "Okay, this is what we want," and they believe he's serious, then they'll respond in that way. And clearly he's serious.
I almost think.
Go ahead.
Well, I almost think that the intelligent Trump supporter, which I'd like to put myself into that category, if you don't mind, almost thinks like it's almost like, well, he knows what he's doing, so I'm just going to give him some slack here and see what happens.
Well, it's simple. It's simple for us. We believe our politicians should explain to us, whether they're Democrat or Republican, what the plan is, because it's not to sit there and say inconsistency is a plan, because what you're telling us is you have to be, with all due respect, you have no idea what he's doing, but you have blind faith that what he's doing is right. And if we object to it based on economics, if we object to parts of it, we don't object to going after China, by the way, at all with tariffs. But we object to the fact of tell the American public the truth.
Okay,
tell the American public what you believe. We're not going to. We don't put blind faith in any person ever. We're cynics. We're conservative. We're conservative libertarian, but we're cynics, and we don't put blind faith in anyone. And we believe it's a responsibility, whether it's a congressperson or the president of the United States, to explain to the American public. And you're saying it's not. That's the message I get, that blind faith is the only thing that matters. If Trump says it, it must be.
I disagree with your use of the word blind faith, and only because as soon as you said it, I thought to myself, I don't want to disclose too much, but yeah, I've been a local politician and I've won 2 elections, and I've sat on a dais on a town council, and I've actually said to people while being recorded, oh my gosh, none of us up here are experts in what we are being asked to decide upon right now. And I think there's a lot of blind faith involved in politics. And I think there's a lot of low information people that tune in as much as they can and then just pull the lever with a little bit of blind faith. And I just don't know if I agree with your use of the word blind faith.
Okay, well, Buck, if what you're saying here again is, and I'm not trying to put words into your mouth or thoughts in your head or trying to speak for you.
Okay, I'm forming them as we go.
But if we're talking here about you trust that the president ultimately would do the right thing, if that is the case, and if it's not, you can let me know. But if that's the case, then if the tariffs are negatively impacting the economy, do you believe he will reverse them?
No, I think he's asking us to read between the lines. And I think he's asking his true supporters, and even the people that
How do you know
read
that?
into it a little bit.
How do you know that?
Oh, I don't know. I'm just telling you what I think.
All
but
right.
I think he's asking us to read between the lines.
But I guess
I don't know what that means, because, again, if it impacts the economy, people have been struggling because we've had
the next thing I was going to say is going to tell you what it means. I think he's asking us to understand this is going to hurt a little bit, but I've got a plan. Trust me, go through the pain, and at the end, there'll be a light at the end of the tunnel. I mean, what do you think about that?
Well, the problem with that is that they've been in pain for years now because of the Biden, what's gone on with inflation, record inflation for a generation, and they're looking for relief, not more pain.
Well, I'll answer it from your point of view, that even if I did have, if I was completely in favor of everything that Trump was doing on tariffs, I am partially, but not on Canada. And I think that what we should have done to begin with is you isolate. He should have done it in 2016. Canada isn't the problem. Mexico is not really the problem. You can deal with all of that because of just the things that we have done to help support their military. You have enough leverage to go after them. Europe, it may take a little bit more, but you needed to unite the entire world and have the trading partners isolate China and Russia and Vietnam, Venezuela, whatever. But you need the free world to basically do that. But let's say I'm in favor completely of what Trump is doing. I know it's going to raise prices, and I know a midterm's coming up. And the prices, this thing, and somebody from the administration said just last week, we may not see the results of this coming till the fourth quarter or the first quarter of last year. Well, you're putting everything that raising the cost of goods and services 9 months before another midterm election that isn't going to affect that midterm election and elect Democrats, and that's what we're scared of.
Yeah,
if you raise prices, and Americans are most sensitive about that right now, even if it's the right thing to do, and you lose the election, then what good is it? 866-90 Red Eye.
Coming up, more with Gary McNamara and Eric Harley. It's Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome and good morning. Thank you so much for being here this morning. More coming up here on, what was it called? Liberation Day. And also Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth orders sex-neutral fitness standards for combat.
Yeah. All right.
As it should be, by the way.
No, I mean, it's got to be the standard.
I'm
not going to be able to meet those standards. It doesn't matter. you know what I mean? But that's the whole point, isn't it? It doesn't matter.
And
Man, woman.
And I'm too old to be drafted if they brought back the draft.
Yeah. Also, it would require standing up, and I'm not into that.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
All across America, he is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome and good morning. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
As we talk tariffs and the last caller, he kept saying that, conservatives out there in the media, whatever. I found this from on Twitter from Will Raciadella. I think that's his name. He's a Fox News producer.
Okay.
All right, and he put this out, and this may be what some in our audience that get angry with us whenever we bring up tariffs.
Mm-hmm.
This might be their opinion. Okay, you ready for this?
Okay.
The issue with libertarian intellectuals on tariffs in particular isn't that they're wrong. On net, they're totally correct. But on net doesn't live in Youngstown, Ohio. They rarely acknowledge that international free trade does have costs, and those costs fall on real people. Their concerns are valid. As smarter economists before me have put it, there are no solutions, only trade-offs. The benefits of free trade go to the whole. The burden falls on the few. The last thing that will convince the few to see your side is a lecture filled with numbers, graphs, and charts. Even worse, a lecture delivered from the comfort of an air-conditioned think tank or tenured perch on a college campus. A better use of that intellectual energy would be advocating for policies that mitigate the real-world cost of free trade without abandoning market principles. That way, the benefits can remain broad without being blind. The worst thing, let me get it here. Hang on one second. I have trouble getting to the whole thing here. The worst thing a self-described market-oriented thinker can do isn't just to ignore the cost of their policy. It's to mock those who dare to notice them. Now I'll let you know that that was written. It was put on somebody at the National Review Facebook site that I watch, and most people disagreed with his analysis on it.
Okay.
One said, it's 100% BS. There are, of course, we to sit there and say that people that are capitalists haven't thought about the evolution of what happens when you have free trade is just dead wrong.
Yeah.
It's talked about consistently. What do they call it? Creative? What do they call it? Creative destruction. Creative destruction.
I was just reading about that yesterday, actually.
Creative destruction.
About. Yep.
It's something that's talked about all the time, and what you do about that when society changes. Now, the last caller was talking about the fact that you guys, that basically saying that we always go back to history. Well, things have changed, and I had to let him know that the whole concept of tariffs is based on Trump's version of history of tariffs back between 1850 and 1917. So, but it's not history. History's got nothing to do with it. It's economics, and economics doesn't change whether it's 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Economics is still the same. How people respond to incentive, and I know that the if you read the Fox News producer there, well, that doesn't mean anything to the people that suffer. And the impression is that if you are somebody who looks at tariffs, not in a way, again, with China, that's a different ball game than everybody else out there. And so we understand it. And as we said before, the goal would be isolate China. Right. If they're not going to follow the rules, isolate China.
Yeah.
You build the trading blocks with friendly, trading partners is what you do.
Right.
But the fact is, the other point is to say that the solution is, and this goes back to the last caller, the solution from this guy is for what he was it? Make sure I get that the way he wrote it. I had it on my phone here. Hang on. The libertarian intellectuals.
Oh, okay.
And his point is that they don't look at the negative in people that are affected by it. And he said the majority benefit, but the few don't. Yeah, and it was pointed out. Yeah, but tariffs affect everybody.
Right. Yeah.
And only benefit the few that get the companies that are picked by government to be able to raise their prices because of a lack of competition, and every American company down the line that doesn't get that benefit has to eat it.
Right.
And so you're still going to have you may not have the creative destruction, which is because of efficiency and technology, some jobs go away, new jobs come in, new businesses and industries are created, as we have seen along the board. Instead of creative destruction, you have more government socialist destruction of an economy based on government control.
Right.
But the fact is, when they try to bring it up that the so-called libertarian intellectuals don't recognize it because they sit from their perch at high, well, you might be able to make that case from some people that sit at a think tank. I don't know.
Right.
But you and I worked in manufacturing.
Yeah. Right.
I've been a union member. I helped decide on whether our local was going to accept a contract when I was part of the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers. I was a United Steel worker, and I was in those jobs in the late 70s, early 80s. I know what it's like.
Mm-hmm.
So, that part of it is where I'd look at that and say, again, dude, you are overgeneralizing what's going on the other side. It's when you look at history and when you see what has been the most successful system in getting people out of poverty, it is capitalism. Are there problems with capitalism? Yes. There's always a problem, because if anybody is hurt in any way, we immediately can focus on that person being hurt, and that's a problem. That person can't be hurt anymore.
Right.
Well, that's why, and thanks for the emailer the other day that said that to me about my dad. That's why my dad back in 1969 told me, you better be good at 3 or 4 or 5 different things.
Mm-hmm.
He said, because you have to adapt for what's going on. You can't have the world adapt to what you want the worldview to be,
Right.
because economics won't allow you to do it.
Right.
My dad taught me that back in 1969. I was 14 years old, and said, you're not going to be able to have, because a lot of people, my dad wasn't one of those people. My dad had numerous jobs, but you're not going to be able to get a job when you're 20 years old and retire at 65. It's not going to happen that way. These changes come quick. And I remember my dad talking about how it must have been when we went from an agricultural economy. Think about it. Roughly, what did we have? 97, 98% of the workforce worked on farms. And in a period of 100 years, it completely reversed.
Right.
There was massive hurt that happened in that. Was that the wrong thing to do? To allow that to happen? Or did we increase the increase the quality of life for all Americans when you look at what technology has done? And in the creative destruction portion of it, millions of people, hundreds of millions of people in that time had to completely change what their profession was and change to something else.
Right.
And if they didn't, then they didn't eat.
Right.
And that's why my dad told me, when the whole thing, college or trade, my father said both.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And he said that back because that talk was even way back. Think about that. My gosh, that's 56 years ago. My father told me that. And so it's like you need to prepare. It's like, what am I going to do now? Well, you need to prepare back then. And that was the lesson that I learned. You cannot change. You can't change economics. You can't change technology. You can't change where it's going to go. Countries that try to do it and try to manage it, for example, and everybody saw this the other day when the story came out of the Wall Street Journal, still not denied by the White House, either Truth Social or as of earlier yesterday. I didn't check since then, but that seemed to have passed over when the Wall Street Journal article came out and said that Trump warned the auto companies, don't you dare raise your prices. And you look at it, it's like, okay, so you're manipulating an economy to raise taxes on the American people and raise the cost of products, and then you're telling the companies, don't raise the products. If Obama did that, there would have been screams of socialism from the right.
Oh, yeah.
Absolute screams of socialism. Mm-hmm. You're trying to tax the American people and make consumer prices go up and make the cost of doing business for all companies.
Yeah, right.
Because it doesn't matter whether you're American or not. If you're import, anything that you make in an automobile, every automobile part that comes in from out of the country will be tariffed. And you and I asked the question, if they do that, and we don't know precisely how they're going to do it, but they put auto parts on it. But you could see the scenario where a foreign-made car would just be tariffed on the entire value of that car, and an American vehicle might have cost more if it was assembled in the United States, but a significant portion of the parts were tariffed. All those parts tariffed instead of the entire car. Is there a possibility it could make the American car more expensive?
Exactly. I mean, that's the concern long term, because, look, we all want the same thing. We want the agenda on the 80-20 stuff to be in full play for the full 4 years. But this is the one thing. There were two main issues going into November: the border, the economy. And looking for that relief. We can talk about whether it was logical or not, realistic or not, that prices would come down immediately on January 20th, because a lot of people were expecting that. They were like, we want prices to come down right away. Then the polls actually showed, all right, we're going to give them a honeymoon period. Well, that honeymoon period won't last until November of next year. It just won't. So all of those impacts, whatever they're going to be, are going to build the reality for November of 26. The reality of November of 24 got Trump a massive win, the biggest political comeback in American history.
And I don't think, as the last caller was saying, because the last caller could not tell you why Trump was doing any of it. And he said it wasn't blind faith. Then he mentioned that you do have to have blind faith when you're in political office at times, because he was in political office, so I wasn't sure where he was going there. But the fact is he couldn't name one goal of Trump in this. And we find that quite interesting, and we find that people won't tell us what they think. I get videos sent to me every day. You need to watch this entire 2-hour video and tell me what you think of this person, what they say on tariffs. And my whole point is, well, what do you think?
Right, yeah.
Well, what do you think? I can go through. I know what economics is. I know it's not. You're not going to change my mind if you increase the cost of doing business. It's going to be passed on to the consumer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Democrats used to make that case with the minimum wage or corporate taxes, that they could put corporate taxes on and corporations aren't going to raise taxes. Well, raise the cost of doing business. Mm-hmm. Well, of course they are. And the number of times this administration has changed their mind on what the goal is the confusion. And if you believe that, well, that's because he knows what he's doing, but he doesn't want to tell anybody else. Well, that's not doing a lot of good to people that have 401ks right now, is it?
Right.
Yeah. If higher prices come, combination of higher prices, slower economy. Mm-hmm. We've seen it in the steel tariffs. And his point was, well, history's not going to tell you anything of economics. Well, of course it will.
Well, yeah, it will, and so will, again, the reality of the moment, and that is, again, because when the American people are looking for relief financially, relief from the economy, after, again, record inflation for a generation, they're not asking for pain so that long-term there can be. You can say, well, this long-term will work and everything. The long-term game isn't in play right now. It just isn't. And it just won't be in November of next year. We can sit around and have that discussion. That's not right now the reality. Maybe without inflation hitting in recent years over 9%, there was, more of a willingness, or you would have more breathing room for it to absorb the impact of tariffs. We could go into that, and I'd have some issues with that. But if that's what you were talking about, without that inflation, that's not where we are. Relief is what they want. And that honeymoon period isn't going to last until November of 26.
Yeah. That's why I said, even if I agreed with everything that Trump was doing and understood it completely, which I don't, because they don't communicate effectively, and then Navarro comes out with the other day, well, we're going to raise $600 billion a year, and that's a tax cut. You're not communicating anything to me about what your goal is.
Right.
866-90-RED-EYE.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-EYE on Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's our crony, and I'm Gary McNamara. So the only thing else I have to say about it is, because we've talked about this, golly, this is probably the most talked about thing I've talked about in my 36 years of talk radio is tariffs, price controls, things like that. Government regulation is something that, has always been a topic, because economics is really our favorite thing to talk about.
Sure.
It always, I know it is for me. It's always been the favorite thing that I love talking about, because we go through cycles where we bring back the same things that haven't worked in the past. Mm-hmm. Now, it doesn't mean, to address that tweet from that guy, the X post, where he was saying that intellectual libertarians won't talk about the cost of it. Well, of course we do, and that's when you talk about education. That's where you talk about retraining. That's where you talk about the fact of, what is the mentality that we teach in our schools and in our homes? What is the culture? Is the culture about work? Because if you want to survive, I think what my dad told me was the best thing. Be good at 3 or 4 different things. And as my dad told me when I said, well, college or trade, he said both. Well, that's hard. Yeah, it's supposed to be hard. If you want security, you got to work hard. There are things that you have to do in order to do it. The other way is, okay, let's change the entire system through government to make everything fair.
Yeah. Right.
You're never going to do that.
No.
You're never, ever, ever, ever going to do that. But when it comes to tariffs, this time around, I'm like, whatever.
Well, again,
economics will judge everything again.
Well, because that's why I asked Buck, the caller, earlier, all right, do you think Trump will reverse the tariffs if it's really hurting the economy? And he says he didn't. The answer was no, he didn't think so. I actually think he will.
Oh, I think he will, too.
Because, again, he doesn't want that to be, even if you're saying, well, he's in it more for the long game, well, he's also in it to build a legacy. And in order to build that legacy, he needs the full 4 years, which if he has the full 4 years, the GOP controlling the House and the Senate for the second term, that's still a short period of time. So, no, I think he will. We've seen it happen.
Yeah.
And there could be many of the tariffs or some of the tariffs could stay in place. China and everything else. And then he can say, well, look, tariffs are working here and here and here and here. And then he can move on from it. But we'll see what happens.
Catch all 5 hours of the show live every night on the Red Eye Radio app. Available in the App Store. Red Eye Radio.
And he is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome and good morning. All right, let's have an ACLU update.
Okay.
I just came up with that now. The ACLU's official position on men playing women's sports
is
the president is a liar. All right, here we go.
Can we change their name to AOCLU?
Here we go.
The policies that are claiming that transgender women in sports are men are wrong. The president is lying when he says that there are men impersonating women and participating in women's sports. There are no examples of men impersonating women that I am aware of. And it is incorrect to refer to transgender women and girls as men and boys. And
that's the official position of the ACLU.
And I need a nap. Can we have another technical difficulty? I need to go home.
It's like,
seriously. I'd bang my head against the wall, but I'd do damage to the wall. My head is huge. I shouldn't do that. I don't even know where to start unpacking that one. ACLU. All right. Yeah, no, we're going to change it. AOCLU.
Getting back to some of the stuff we were talking about before, just the politics of tariffs and everything else, and as we both said, even if we agreed with everything that Trump was doing and understood what he was doing, and we don't, because, again, even the caller that agrees with what Trump is doing could not tell us what he was doing.
Right.
And was just saying, no, I just have faith that he's doing the right thing. The problem is, again, the midterms. If you don't have the House, it's done.
Right.
And so you've got just a little bit over, you've got a year and a half left to do something. If the economy is not back, and again, the White House is saying you're going to have to take time. This may not be resolved till the end of this year or the beginning of next year, well, then you're in the election already. And what do you mean? How much will it recoup because of putting tariffs on, or will you end up lifting tariffs? I believe that if there's too much economic damage, the president will pull it.
Well,
I think he believes there will be.
And we've seen, because we've seen that happen. There were some moves on tariffs in his first term, and we have a recent example indicator, not an example, but an indicator as to why we think that. The auto companies, the OEM, domestic OEMs called him and said, "Hey, this is going to inflict a great deal of pain." Okay, we'll pause it. He paused. Well, the pause means he doesn't like that pain. He doesn't like the idea of that pain. So if we get into this, and we're here May 2nd, and May 2nd is, there's a lot going on in corporations and CEOs. I do believe there are a number of CEOs that are calling him. Again, he's friends with many of them, and are telling him, this is the problem. And once it's in play, this is why we say, all right, whatever you're going to do, let's get on with it.
Yeah, do it. Don't.
If
it's the best thing, don't delay it.
Right. And if it's going to be the pain, get it over with.
Yeah.
Get it behind us, Hyundai investment in the steel plant, that's great. NVIDIA, that's great. That's awesome. These are all great things. But ultimately, the economy has to reflect it. I mean, quite frankly, those are good for jobs, no doubt. But ultimately, they're good for Hyundai. And no offense to Hyundai, I'm sure they have fine products. I don't own any. But they're a foreign company, and we're talking about making America great again. So these are things, NVIDIA, same thing. We're talking about, what it is we want the economy as a whole to do, because we want Trump to be effective for all 4 years.
Well, this is a problem, and Scott Jennings laid it out yesterday with the Wisconsin Supreme Court race. Mm-hmm. And this is why there has to be success in the economy that is felt by the American people extremely soon. And this is one of the reasons why. Here's Scott Jennings on this, I think it was yesterday, on CNN. Here we go.
I do think a couple of things are true. Number one, the Republican Party is grappling with a new reality. We have a lot of voters in the party that do not vote regularly. They're low propensity voters. They turned out for Donald Trump. They like to vote when he's on the ballot. But even in the November election, you saw people show up, vote Trump, and then leave the rest of it blank. One of the things the party has to do is condition those people to show up even when Donald Trump is not the person they're voting for. Number two, I think the Elon Musk point that you played earlier about the future of Western civilization, I actually think this is a key issue the Republicans ought to lean in on.
If a party controls the House, it to a significant degree controls the country, which then steers the course of Western civilization. So it's like, I feel like this is one of those things that may not seem that it's going to affect the entire destiny of humanity, but I think it will. Yeah.
Because it's not just a one-off election when you're voting in the Wisconsin Supreme Court race or some congressional special election in Florida. These things matter. There are ripple effects. A vote here causes major implications on policy down the line. So I think Elon is actually onto something with that messaging. And I hope Republicans, especially the new ones who aren't regular voters, take it to heart.
That's a problem because the midterm, Trump's not going to be on the ballot.
Right.
And so you want an economy that has definitely shown the American public, all right, it's improved and things are much better. And when you yet have no idea where reconciliation is going, what they're going to be able to get through, whether this stuff will be able to get the votes. You saw Luna leaving the Congressional Conservative Caucus because she couldn't get through. She wanted, where if you're, I think a first-time mother, you get time off, or you can vote. Excuse me, you can vote from home, and Republicans weren't allowed to do it. Said nope, no exceptions.
Right.
For this.
Right.
And so she quit. She quit the conservative caucus and was pretty angry about it. You have such few numbers right now, which is why Stefanik is staying in.
Right.
Why she's not going to become U.S. ambassador.
Yeah, UN.
What did I say? UN.
US.
Yeah, U.S. ambassador to the UN. And that's because they have so few votes to spare. They're trying to do so much. And so if you don't get this economy moving, Republicans lose the House. And then it doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah. Well,
that's it.
I mean, it's, you point out something here that is already an issue to begin with. The GOP has, it's a slim majority in the House, and still has issues. We have a lot of questions as to how it's going to go down with reconciliation, and are conservatives going to be able to get the cuts they want and all of this? Well, that in and of itself is an issue. But the midterm is everything. Because if the Democrats take the House, it's over.
Yep.
And then, we'll go on to impeachment 3, 4, 5, and 6, or wherever they want to go. And it's over. Everything that happened in November, the political comeback, the greatest political comeback in American history, would be over.
Yep.
And I don't want that.
It's that simple. And so even if I agreed with all of the tariffs, because I completely understood what Trump is doing, I agree with going after China. You already know what our plan would have been on that. We've been talking about that since 2017. If you don't win because the economy doesn't improve and prices don't come down, because a significant number of those people that won't vote Republican but just vote Trump voted because they believed prices would come down on day one because he said prices would come down on day one.
Right.
Now, we knew they wouldn't. But once the promise was made, independents, whoever, populists said, okay, we'll vote for Trump. No other Republican, but we'll vote for Trump. You don't have that. You lose that. The insanity begins again with the left.
Yep.
That's our biggest concern.
Yep.
And so it would be actually the opposite of being a rhino. You wish Republicans to stay in power.
And not for them, but so that Trump can get everything done. Again, because look, we've got
so much of what he's doing is the right thing to do.
It's the right thing to do. If there is a renewed confidence in the GOP, it's because from me, it's because of Donald Trump. You and I have had issues with the GOP for a long, long time. Well, we're celebrating coming up this July 20 years as a team, and it's over 20. You and I separately, even before we were a team, had issues with the GOP. This is about his agenda. We want that to continue.
866-90-RED-EYE.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90-RED-EYE.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome and good morning. So, we'll see what happens with all of this as we get close to Liberation Day.
Okay, I'm going to do something here. It is April 1st, April Fool's Day. I'm going to do a reverse April Fool's.
All right.
I was never in Aerosmith. I was never in the band Aerosmith. So I'll do opposite April Fools. There you go. There you have it. I was Clay Aiken's bass player for a few gigs, but
That had to be pure torture. Oh, my God.
Well, I got fired because I didn't learn the songs, and that's mainly because I don't listen to Clay Aiken.
I only did once as a talk show host an April Fool's joke.
Mm-hmm.
And I did it as serious as I could.
Yeah.
And this is when I first became a talk show host. My first talk show radio job, which would have been in Niagara Falls, New York, back in 89.
Yeah.
So it might have been, I would have had to feel comfortable, so it was maybe at least a year in where I did it, or 6 months, 7 months in where I felt comfortable because I didn't want to do the show. I mean, I just never in my wildest dreams I ever thought I'd be doing a stupid job like this, which ended up being the best job and exactly what I believe, made to do. But it was, got on the air and said, it's just ridiculous. Some of the responses I'm getting from people. I mean, people just don't know the issues at all. And I've changed my mind completely. Damn the Constitution. We need a test. You need a test to be able to vote. I know people relate it to a poll tax, but no, we need to have qualifications. We need to have people being tested. I got a couple people who called, and after about 10 minutes of it, every person started saying, "Stop it. The April Fools, we understand it's April Fools."
Yeah, you were outed. All right.
Yeah, I was outed real quick there. I was.
Yeah.
It was like they said, "Okay, he's." Even though they said, "But wouldn't it be great if we had a test?" And you and I said, "There should be just one test."
No, when you said that, when you're telling the story, I'm thinking maybe we should have a test. Actually,
one question, right?
One question.
What's the one question?
Name the three branches of government.
Right. That's it. That'd be the test.
Right.
And everybody, you would be told beforehand what the question was.
Yes.
Name the three branches of government.
This is the question that you will have. Here it is.
In order to vote.
Because what would that, and people say, well, no, they should learn it, that they should already know it. Well, no. We would actually be educating a lot of people. Because if they wanted to vote, they would be learning the three branches of government, some of them for the first time. That's a good thing. Yeah, we do have our standard. We believe that should be for call-out research. So all of our friends over at Rasmussen. You guys, Rasmussen reports.
Should there be a test to be able to vote, and should it be just one question?
Well, and there should be a qualifier for call-out research. Can you name the three branches of government? Okay, you can be a respondent.
Oh, for the research.
Right,
okay,
yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So all the above.
For the polling, yes.
Exactly.
Now somebody's going to go viral. These guys want a test to vote.
Yes. Why not?
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
All across America and around the world, we are Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome and good morning.
Hello.
Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks a lot.
I guess because we had played Ezra Klein and also the writer from The Atlantic that did the book Abundance, you know, what Democrats are doing wrong, and talked about, for example, California and all the regulations and everything else. Just so people know, if you've seen the interview, and because a lot of Democrats have been commenting on it, abundance, what that actually means. When you talk about capitalism, abundance is the fact that, and it's interesting because it does relate, we're not talking about tariffs, but it does relate to being able to get a lot of things cheaply.
Yeah, right.
That's what abundance.
Right, yeah.
In capitalism, you're provided the abundance of so many different things, that you can choose from, that come from it. And abundance is also the fact that when, for example, something comes along, some piece of electronics that ends up being extremely cheap, whether it's something in a chip, for example, that then can replace so many different machines that existed before, then that chip becomes an abundance and it becomes extremely cheap. And cheap, the chip,
The cheap chip.
the cheap chip. It becomes cheap because of and it creates an abundance from all the products that productivity and efficiency gives you, which is why when we talk about what drives an economy, it is the profit motive and productivity. That's why productivity matters so much to an economy.
Right.
That's how efficient you are. And so it's the abundance that's created. So it's interesting to find out some of the reviews, of the book Abundance. I have not read it, but saying the problem is what the Democrats are talking about in abundance is the government spending, what we heard. Oh my gosh, one thing I can say, you don't hear the word investment anymore.
Oh, yeah. Well, the investment
private investment, but not not government investment. The government taking your money instead of giving it to people to invest, because when you invest your money, when you actually invest it in the private sector, it goes for productive purposes.
Right.
Which means that money goes to startups and corporations, whatever, that will take that capital and use it to create more wealth, sell it at a profit, and that's what actually drives the economy.
The goal is a return on that investment.
Right. And what you're creating in the company, they're able to create more abundance for the people, which means more cheap products. I will say this, though, that's the one thing that's lost in the tariffs is the importance of what prices are. Because sometimes in tariffs, it's how many workers.
Right.
For example, we always hear manufacturing has cratered in this country. No, manufacturing goes up all the time.
Mm-hmm.
The amount of what we produce goes up all the time.
Yeah.
Is it less of GDP because it's being crowded out by tech and service and everything else? Absolutely. But those are also legitimate parts of an economy.
Right. Because what we look at is overall productivity.
Right.
Not necessarily just manufacturing. That is a part of it.
So you have fewer workers, but you're produced in the manufacturing base, but you're producing so much more.
Mm-hmm.
Farming, perfect example,
the
Industrial Revolution, going from agriculture to manufacturing base.
Right.
You had roughly, what did you have, 95 to 98% of Americans in that 100-year period that had a completely shift, what the focus was of an economy, completely shift.
Right.
Whether AI will do that, probably not. I don't believe it'll be the same way as, what has happened. I don't believe where Bill Gates. What did Bill Gates say? Well, there'll only be 3 jobs left or something. I saw a headline last week or something.
Mm-hmm.
Even Mark Cuban said, "No, that's not the case. There's still going to be jobs around." But I just found it interesting because Andy Kessler in the Wall Street Journal. Can the left do abundance? Progressives find a new slogan, but they misunderstand its real economic meaning. That's what brought me to it. It's like fearing a long journey in the political wilderness. Democrats are now trying on different skins, much like the serial killer in the Silence of the Lambs.
She put the lotion in the basket.
Bernie
Put the lotion in the basket.
Bernie Sanders-esque, benefits over billionaires is as tired as prune juice. So now we have supply-side progressives and now abundance liberals. Just writing this triggers my oxymoron radar.
That's funny.
Abundance could work. It certainly sounds better than anything else I've heard recently, including James Carville's suggestion for Democrats to play dead.
Yeah.
And then he goes on to talk about an economist in the 80s in his supply side book, Wealth and Poverty, that Ronald Reagan read. enabling decades of technology-led growth. He was the first to talk about the whole abundance concept. It's waste what's abundant to make up for what's scarce. What is abundant is cheap. He said the price signal tells you to waste it. What's scarce is expensive. Instead of using economics to allocate what's scarce, just waste something else until what you want is no longer scarce. And he brings up the whole chips. We waste abundant, cheap transistors inside microchips to offset the need for expensive computers and wires. We waste abundant bandwidth instead of driving to the library to look up stuff.
Okay.
So you're not really wasting it. He's trying to make the case that you just go in and you produce so many of the cheap things in order to provide the abundance, which improves people's quality of life.
Right.
So he said, and he makes a great point.
It's interesting because I was thinking about this. I was talking to somebody at the truck show, in fact, a friend of mine, and she is and basically she and I were in this meeting, an echo chamber for each other because she's a conservative, and we were talking about the economy, but the economy of a pencil, right? The Milton Friedman.
Yeah, right.
So you think about it, and I love this idea because you break it down. All right, all the elements of it, that how you make a pencil and all the companies involved in making one pencil, and then you think about the price of a pencil, right? All these companies coming together to make this one pencil. And it's like, well, that doesn't make sense. Like when you get on the Amazon and say, oh, I want this $8 widget and I want it by tomorrow. And a truck, in fact, a series of things in the supply chain have to move to get your widget to your door. Well, but it's the demand overall. It's the economy overall. And everybody's scratching their head. Well, my gosh, does it make sense for them to waste all that fuel to get me my $8 widget? Well, it's a massive, massive business. And it's not just you. It's the compounding effect of an economy that is working as a part of that supply chain. So, I mean, those are the things that you and I love talking about. And they're all in play. This is why we also feel that it's important to talk about everything that impacts the economy, whether it's tariffs or taxes or anything else.
And he said, we now waste abundant computing power for generative artificial intelligence, which is true. You think about it, too. I'll add some more in. You want to produce as much electricity as possible because you want to be able to use his term, because you're not really wasting it. Right. But you have such an abundance of it that it's cheap, and you want to waste that in order to prove productivity all the way down the line. And he says the scarcest resource is people's time, which always becomes scarce as other things become abundant. You and I talk about this, that doing a talk radio show now compared to 30 years ago is a completely different ballgame.
Yeah.
Completely different ballgame, how you do it.
I had a gentleman come up to me the other day at the show, and he goes, you and Gary, I guess y'all have, and he was smiling, y'all have no shortage of things to talk about. Actually, he started with, I guess there's nothing to talk about for you and Gary every night, huh? And he smiled at me. He knew that I knew where he was going. And that is, in today's world, the preparation is different. We have so many things thrown at us, but we have a 5-hour show, and there's so much going on because of the technology that comes together and how many stories and topics there are.
We would never be able to, with the scarcity of time, we've been able to become so much more productive. We used to go in to do a radio show, and you'd have to cut out. I used to cut out things from the newspaper when I first became a talk show host.
Yeah.
And then if your company even had, you hope they had a copier.
Right.
So you could put it on a little harder paper that you could hold on to.
Or you would tape it onto the paper or staple it onto the paper, or a bigger piece of paper, sometimes. So you could highlight it and do all that.
Exactly. But, and so people, you become better just because of repetition, probably doing anything in life, including talk radio. But the real advancement of, we had a caller that we had talked about tariffs. He goes, man, you guys, the research and stuff you have to do, he just found amazing. But it's so much easier. I don't have to go. We don't have to go anywhere. I used to have to go to the library to research something.
We had to stop and get a USA Today every day.
I used to buy a USA Today, Wall Street Journal. Yeah. There was probably a local newspaper, sometimes two local newspapers, and probably one of the Washington Post or the New York Times, just to have whatever you needed.
Time magazine,
and you'd sit there, you'd cut it all out, but by the time you get on the air, all those stories are 24 hours old.
Yeah, oh yeah,
12 to 24 hours old.
Right.
You couldn't do that in today's, in today's talk radio. You couldn't do it and give the public what they want, which is analysis of what's going on right now.
Right.
Like 10 minutes ago or 20 minutes ago.
Right.
And so, it's a tremendous amount of work, but it's so much easier to do because you're so much more efficient because of all the technology.
Yeah.
Smartphone. I just held up the smartphone here. Mm-hmm. Computer in front of me here. Just everything that you have. Now, you got to go through maybe some more information. You got to pay attention because a lot of the stuff out there is BS.
Yeah, you got to wade through a lot of
media.
Garbage to find something.
But the fact is, it makes it so much easier.
Yeah.
And we're able to do things. I tell people all the time, they say, how do you do it? And I said, technology.
Yeah.
Technology. And I'd like to say my natural, incredible talent, but not many people are probably going to believe that one.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, but it's technology that has made us do it where we have, the beauty of it is because we don't need 20 producers, you don't need a producer to do all your research for you anymore.
Even on that side, I mean, our producers are much more efficient. You know what I mean?
Well, maybe not ours.
Yeah. Don't worry, they're not listening to the show.
Look at Alan. No, Alan was just shaking his head going, oh, here he goes again.
I think they're playing badminton in there. I don't know what's going on.
But it's like there's so much you can do, to get the audio cuts. Everything you need now is right there for you. I remember just 22, 23 years ago, I remember having a digital recorder that I would have to put up to the TV to get
audio.
I'd be watching C-SPAN all day to get audio, then have to edit through, go into the. I mean, it took so incredible amount of time to do those things, and now it's made you so efficient. But what he talks about here is abundance for Democrats, but that's the basic concept of abundance in capitalism. And he said, from what I gather, the left version of their so-called abundance error isn't to encourage a further digital revolution, but instead to tap into the power of big government. Rather than subsidize demand, talk about waste, the neo-abundance crowd suggests that big government should magically create abundance by edict, build green energy systems, more housing, vertical farms, more healthcare infrastructure. Easier said than done. Reforming rules for new housing permits is long overdue. Others on the left, they sure love to disagree, criticize the Johnny-come-lately abundance agenda because of the latent fear of deregulation. Oh, no, not that. They need to get over it. But they talk about their abundance is a monopoly being involved to give you more abundance. It's just using a new word that Republicans have been using, and a lot of the pseudo-conservative libertarian intellectuals. I had to throw that one out. Yeah. Somebody put that on, by the way, on. Thank you, Plato Geek, for putting that on there. Conservative libertarian intellectuals.
Yeah, right.
Not just libertarian intellectuals.
Right,
from the story we did before. So it's the same thing for them. For the left, it's still the same thing. We're just going to throw another word in and say, but big government can provide the abundance.
Right.
So you're not getting anywhere. Right. And they do talk in the book, though, about the deregulation, but that's never going to happen because you lose control. When you deregulate, you lose control.
Yeah.
It's the same thing like the meme I saw yesterday, which is so true. If Trump was Hitler, he wouldn't be getting rid. If Trump was a Nazi, he wouldn't be getting rid of the Department of Education.
He'd be using that as his biggest tool, one of his biggest tools.
Right. No dictator, no Nazi wants to say, okay, states and localities, you form the minds of the youth.
Yeah, because imagine a political group that would be using public education systems or the public education system to indoctrinate children. See, that would never happen, right? That's exactly what the left is doing, But the left is accusing him of, being Hitler, and he wants to get rid of the Department of Education. I almost said DOE. By the way, that's Department of Energy.
Then he writes, I'm all for abundance. The Trump administration's deregulation moves, though somewhat offset by tariff tantrums, are the right step. But abundance liberals' idea of creating more government is to create more government. To create more abundance is seriously misguided.
Sure. Yeah.
In their new book, Abundance, they point to California's San Francisco to Los Angeles high-speed rail as a government project mirrored in regulation and environmental reviews. Sure, but that's not really why the cuckoo choo-choo Southwest Airline flies that trip virtually every hour failed. Instead, it was government incompetence. Yeah. The line could have run along Interstate 5 corridor and in many cases right between the north and southbound lanes on land the government already controlled.
Yeah,
and they
exactly.
Didn't do it.
Yeah.
866-90 Red Eye.
Brought to you by Hot Shot Secret.
Hi, I'm Jen Loomis, a transport safety expert at J.J. Keller, and I'm here to share a tip on speed and space management. When driving, you need to manage the space around your vehicle so that there's enough space to allow you to adjust when traffic conditions change. The space ahead of your vehicle is the most important and one of the easiest to monitor and adjust as needed. One rule of thumb is to allow at least 1 second for each 10 feet of vehicle length at speeds below 40 miles per hour. At greater speeds, add an additional second. It's impossible to keep other drivers from tailgating you, but there are some things you can do to make it safer, such as increasing your following distance, avoiding quick lane changes, and slowing down. There are also several things you should do to ensure that there is plenty of space between the side of your vehicle and other vehicles. Don't hug the center line, avoid hugging the right side of the road, and avoid traveling alongside other vehicles in strong winds, especially crosswinds. This tip was brought to you by J.J. Keller and Associates. Visit us at jjkeller.com.
We'll be right back with more Red Eye Radio with Eric Harley and Gary McNamara.
It's Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome and good morning. I'll say one thing. There has been no talk. I've heard nothing. Maybe I missed it. But from what I can see, I've heard nothing about Canada being the 51st state.
Nope. Breaking news, the Trump administration believes Mexico should be the 51st state and Canada should be the 52nd state.
Well, I mean, I know Trump did say he plans the whole thing about a third term. No, he's talking about Trump believes he can be a first-term prime minister of Canada. I couldn't even get that out. I started choking trying to get that out.
Catch all 5 hours of the show live every night on the Red Eye Radio app. Available in the App Store. Red Eye Radio.
And he is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Defense Secretary Hegseth on Sunday evening ordered the military services to set sex-neutral physical fitness standards for combat arms, reversing more than a decade of erosion of the standards in hopes of recruiting more women. For far too long, we allowed standards to slip and different standards for men and women in combat arms, military occupational specialties, and jobs. That's not acceptable, Hegseth said in a video on his plane flying back from Japan before signing a memo to implement that to order, which was the correct thing for him to do.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's only logical. We need the fittest of the fit. The standard should be the same for everybody.
Now, this is interesting.
Yeah.
A bombshell report. This is from the New York Post. Bombshell report from a clean energy group admitted from a clean energy group admitted that shifting to solar and wind may mean chaos for New York's power grid as the state's green energy law creates hurdles for cost and reliability. The report from the New York Affordable Clean Power Alliance, which represents solar and wind, noted that the state's timetable to phase out energy generated by fossil fuels is unrealistic and even dangerous. Duh. Stupid is as stupid does. The New York City area is forecasted to experience a generation shortfall starting in 2033, driven by an increase in peak demand and planned retirement for existing dispatchable generation. The report says New York faces hurdles in maintaining reliability due to ambitious renewable targets, the projected retirement of much of its flexible fossil fuel generation fleet, growing load, and extreme weather, the report said. Unlike, this is from the clean energy group that represents solar and wind. I can't make this up.
Yeah.
Unlike fossil fuels, which provide dispatchable generation around the clock, renewables depend on weather conditions, making real-time supply and demand balancing more complex. End of quote. That's a quote, the report said.
Wow. So what you're trying to say is it's not working.
Utility giant Con Edison recently proposed double-digit rate hikes for gas and energy bills, blaming the hikes partially on the cost of complying with green mandates. Skyrocketing costs to connect solar and wind power to the electric grid has also been a problem. These interconnection costs have doubled across all renewable projects from 2017 to 2023, the report says.
Under my plan of cap and trade, electricity rates will necessarily skyrocket. Barack Obama, 2008, talking to the San Francisco Chronicle. And there you have it. I mean, this is it. I mean, nobody said cap and trade for, I don't know, probably much since then. But this is the idea. You implement all of these mandates, and then eventually it's got to be passed on to the consumer. He said it in that very conversation. And here we are. And you're not going to be able to wind and energy aren't going to get it done. I mean, wind and solar aren't going to get it done.
You know what's happening?
It's just not going to happen.
You know what's happening here? They see the fact that their long-term business model is dead if electricity prices go up too much.
Well, that's what happened with healthcare. Remember, with Obamacare, because the idea was, and then remember the couple out of California. Well, we support Obamacare. We didn't know we were going to have to pay for it. Everybody thought it was going to be free, but of course, it costs everything. All the premiums you're going to have to pay into, and electricity here. That's that threshold. When you get summer of 2008. Oil was at $147 a barrel, the highest it's ever been. And that's when, remember, the poll showed more Democrats were on the drill, baby, drill thing. Mm-hmm. It's because you start inflicting that pain, and it doesn't matter where the political line is, what the agenda is, people are going to scream, and that's going to come back on you and whatever mandates you put in place.
Yeah, because the cost, we know that fossil fuels, we know that with abundance, with producing and going after all oil and natural gas that we can get,
right,
that we can produce much cheaper electricity, and they're afraid the public's going to realize that all this cost increase is due to solar and wind.
Yep.
And the other thing is, too, as they mentioned here, one of the other problems is nobody wants a solar and wind farm near them.
Right. Remember in Martha's Vineyard?
Yeah.
There was this proposal to put a nearby solar farm.
Yep.
Like, come on, liberals. We thought that's what you wanted. That's the picturesque landscape of Martha's Vineyard with a bunch of wind farms in the distance, right? No, they didn't.
Let's go to Steve in San Francisco. Steve, you're on Red Eye Radio. Welcome to the show.
Hey, what's up, guys? I haven't spoken to you since the 2020 BLM riots. But anyway, you were talking about Trump losing, the Republicans losing the House in 26 if Trump doesn't turn around the economy. And I don't believe that's true because I don't believe the American people want the borders wide open again. So I don't believe the economy is everything. Usually it's at the top of the list for voting, but this time I think it's different. And plus, with all the population shifts going on, there's a lot of blue states losing seats, and all the red states are gaining seats. So
you're right. You're right there. Again, the problem is the fact of what Scott Jennings said, one of the many problems, and that is there's a ton of people that voted for Trump that don't vote in normal elections. They don't vote. They voted for Trump, and he talked about the concern that the Republican Party has of even in November of 2024, the people that's why Trump outperformed members of the House and the Senate is because they didn't vote. They voted for Trump and wouldn't even bother to vote for any Republicans. And so when you've got, as we stated earlier, when you've got this election coming up, when you've got a number of these already special elections in Pennsylvania that have been lost, they're concerned about that special election in Florida. They're concerned about the Supreme Court election in Wisconsin, that you've only got a couple of people that you can lose in the House. And if the economy, which was one of the two top, and I've just looked at the latest Pew Research poll, inflation and healthcare costs skyrocketing, with both are inflation. They're two separate topics, but they're one and the same. The number 1 and 2 topics out there. So the issues out there for the American public. So nobody's saying it's everything, but it is the most important thing right now. And it's the one thing that Trump is way underwater on in every single poll. Not just one poll, every single poll. And that's the concern for the midterm.
And, Steve, you point out the border, which is absolutely true. But the problem is, with that argument, what you miss there is that was Trump's agenda. The House race, they'll need help from Trump. I don't have confidence in the party itself, in the GOP. I lost confidence a long time ago. But what happened in 24, people were counting on Trump, and he did, because administratively he could do it. He fixed the border pretty quickly. And that's the difference, is that the House race is a very different race. You get into all those districts, and it gets down to the wire. Look, they should have won by a larger margin. But as Gary points out, a lot of people showed up, voted for him, and didn't vote in the House election and walked out. The down ballot didn't benefit from Trump, and hopefully that will change in November. But you've got to have everything as a well-oiled machine between now and then, and that has to be the case. Otherwise, you're risking that, again, that slim margin is the brink. You don't want to be over that threshold.
And, and by the way, and I do hope it's true that people will be just as concerned on the border, what Trump has done, which has been wonderful what he's done, because he solved that problem in a month.
Yeah.
That problem was solved in a couple of weeks. It was solved, and the American public noticed it. Hopefully that's on the American public's mind, that they don't want to go back, and they look at the totality of what Trump has done and transfers it to the members of Congress. And I hope that happens.
Steve, you've got the brains to put that together, but a lot of people don't think that way. That's why they voted differently. They were, look, we just want Trump in there. We want him for these things. And then the midterm, they don't see that as, one and the same. And they are. You've got to have the House in order to finish out your second term. So that's what it's all about. Thanks, Steve. We appreciate the call.
Yeah, thanks.
And it just, I do have, I wouldn't call it blind trust. It's based on history from one of our previous callers. That if I do have confidence that the president will reverse things and adjust accordingly when you start seeing negative numbers. We've seen recent evidence of that. We've seen, we believe that the GDP now, or the GDP numbers and productivity numbers that were coming out had some influence there. We believe, again, I believe that the CEOs of many large corporations and from many industries, I believe they've got his ear. I believe they're calling the White House. They're petitioning, whether they're talking to him directly. They're getting the message to him on this, and he's going to see. If there's a negative impact on the economy, then there will be a change. I don't think he's going to let that go on for a long time. I just don't.
I saw the Atlanta Fed move their number to negative 0.5% growth for the first quarter.
Is there an update? Okay.
Yeah,
I checked
I
it.
saw that.
When did I check it? Yesterday? Or
I think the Wall Street
everything's just a blur right now.
I know. I think the Wall Street Journal had that it was.
Yeah, I'm going to go to the GDP Now forecast and see where it is here. All right. No, March 28th. The latest is negative 2.8.
Is
now,
it negative 2.8? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I forgot what I was. I don't know. Then.
And that's down from where it was last week. Last week it had gone up to negative 1.6, but it's back down to negative 2.8 as of March 28th. I don't know when the next.
Okay.
The next update will be today. Actually, it says at the GDP Now website. So
okay, I'll see if I can find that story. You know, the problem is I've got so much because yesterday's show was canceled. I've got like 50 different.
Here it is. All right. The alternative model forecast, which adjusts for imports and exports of gold as described here, is negative 0.5%.
That's the number that they had. Okay.
But their latest estimate, again, for the current quarter is negative 2.8.
Okay, just the GDP not included.
Right.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. So that's what
I was going to say. I mean, I didn't know. That would have been a huge story if it would have been the actual GDP number, not the gold transfer rate.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't know the breakdown
because I didn't hear anything on it. If they went from negative 2.4 to 0.5, what happened to give them that optimism? When I saw that number yesterday, I was like, okay. Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting, actually. I kind of, that is a little, it's just the Atlanta Fed, but everybody's watching it because if there's an indicator, you just kind of keep your eye on it. But this alternative model forecast here, which adjusts for imports and exports of gold, is negative 0.5%. That's interesting. And I wonder, again, where that will
That's
come
the
out.
number that won't be, that number is not going to be reported.
Right. That's not
it'll
the
be
overall
reported.
number.
It won't be publicized.
Exactly.
866-90 Red Eye.
Coming up, more with Gary McNamara and Eric Harley. It's Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Download our Red Eye Radio app today. Why? Because our show ends in an hour. Yes, just a little over an hour. The show ends, and after the show ends, the show is recorded. It becomes our podcast. You can listen to our podcast all day long, whenever you want, 24/7, 365, at your convenience on the Red Eye Radio app.
That's right.
And
unless there are technical difficulties.
Well, yeah, that happened yesterday, didn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It should have happened today. It's April Fool's Day.
Yeah.
Then people would have gone, see, what kind of April Fool's joke is this?
April Fool? I got nothing on it.
I got nothing.
I got nothing.
Yeah.
I got nothing. Which doesn't mean that we have something. That wasn't in April
Yeah,
Fool's.
we're not trying to,
Right.
exactly, yeah.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One.